Hello, this is the Bible History School. This is the 48th session of Revelation and World History. At our Bible History School, we are serializing Revelation and World History in 12 chapters. As of last time, we have completed lectures from chapter 1 to chapter 6. This video is a collection of the entire video from chapter 6, sections 1 to 8 of Revelation and World History, provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lecture, Revelation and World History. Hello, this is the 40th lecture on Revelation and World History. In the last lecture, we completed chapters 1 through 5 of Revelation and World History. In chapters 1 and 2, we explored the identity of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. We learned that the 7 heads referred to the Soviet Union, ruled by 7 supreme leaders for 70 years. The 10 horns referred to the CIS, which gained independence after the collapse of the Soviet Union. In Chapter 3, we examined the historical reality of 666. The combined numbers of North Korea's Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il's names add up to 666. Kim Il-sung was born in 1912. That year coincides with the formation of the First General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church of Korea. At that time, the total membership of the Presbyterian Church of Korea reached 144,000. It was Kim Il-sung who annihilated the North Korean Church, once called the Jerusalem of the East. In Chapter 5, we looked at the historical and geographical features of the place where this prophecy was fulfilled. We have learned that the contents of the prophecy are being fulfilled, focusing on the Korean Peninsula and the Korean Church. In this lecture, we will explore another conqueror, mentioned in the prophecy, Gog and Magog. Revelation and World History, Chapter 6, Gog and Magog. Section 1, The Identity of Gog and Magog. Another historical development, closely related to the beast in the book of Revelation, is the war waged by Gog, the king of Magog. Let's look at Revelation chapter 20. When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations in the 4 corners of the earth. Gog and Magog to gather them together for battle, their number as the sand of the sea. They spread out over the vast expanse of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them. Then the devil, who had deceived them, was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are. They will be tormented, day and night forever and ever. Revelation chapter 20, verses 7 to 10. This war of Gog and Magog must be interpreted alongside the millennial kingdom. However, Revelation does not provide any clues about Gog and Magog. However, the original account of Gog and Magog appears in the book of Ezekiel. So, we must first examine the account of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel. Let us examine Ezekiel chapter 38. Then the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, set your face toward Gog, the land of Magog, the king of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him. Thus says the Lord God, I am against you, Gog, king of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. I will turn you around, and put hooks in your mouths. I will bring you out, all your army, horses and horsemen, a great horde in full armor, carrying shields and bucklers, and all your people. I will bring you out with you, Persia, Cush, and Put, all with shield and helmet. I will bring down Gomer and all its bands, and the Togarmahites in the far north, with all their bands, a great multitude of peoples with you. Prepare yourself, you and all who are gathered around you, prepare yourselves, and be their leader. After many days, in the latter years, you will be commanded to come to the land, to the mountains of Israel, which have long been desolate. The people of the land have escaped the sword, and are gathered in from many countries, coming from foreign lands and living securely. You will go up, you and all your troops, and the many peoples with you, like a storm, covering the land like a cloud. Thus says the sovereign Lord, on that day, thoughts will come into your mind, and you will devise an evil scheme. You will say, I will go up against the cities of the plain. I will go against a people who live securely, all of them, though they have no walls, gates, or bars. Lift up your hand and say, I will plunder and spoil the land, that was once desolate and now inhabited, and its goods. You will also strike the people, who live in the center of the earth. The merchants of Sheba, Dedan, and Tarshish, with their rich men, will say to you, have you come to take plunder? Son of man, prophesy further and say to Gog, this is what the sovereign Lord says, will you not know it, when my people Israel lives safely? You will come from the northernmost parts of your land, with many people, all riding on horses, a great horde and a mighty army. You will come against my people Israel, like a cloud covering the land. In the latter days, O Gog, I will bring you against my land. So that, all the nations may know me, when I am sanctified in you, before their eyes. Thus says the sovereign Lord, are you not he of whom I spoke in ancient times by my servants the prophets of Israel? On that day, when comes against the land of Israel, I, the Lord, will be angry, declares the Lord God. But on that day, there will be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. Every mountain will crumble, every cliff will fall, and every wall will crumble to the ground. Thus says the Lord God, I will call a sword against him, on all my mountains. I will judge him again, with plague and bloodshed, and I will rain fire and brimstone on him, and all his multitude and the many peoples with him. Thus I will magnify myself, and be known in the eyes of many nations. And they will know that, I am the Lord. Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 1 to 23. Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 describe the nature of Gog and Magog, and the actions of their nations. Gog is a title of king, who rules over Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, a person from the land of Magog. Magog is the name of the country he rules, Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 2 to 3. Given that he rules over multiple nations, Magog likely represents an empire that conquered many. We must find a country or empire in world history that matches the description in this passage. Then, we must determine whether the Gog and Magog mentioned in Ezekiel are the same as those mentioned in Revelation, or whether they refer to different entities. First, both Babylon and the Magog, mentioned in the prophetic books, share the commonality of being empires that emerged from the north and conquered many nations, Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 15, Jeremiah 25 verse 9. The merchants of the earth also appear, Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 13, Revelation chapter 18 verses 11 to 15. It also resembles the scene where God gathered birds and animals to feast on the flesh of the animals. When God destroyed this empire, Ezekiel chapter 39 verses 17 to 20, Revelation chapter 19 verses 17 to 21. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 15, tells us that they waged wars of conquest, using a great multitude and an army, all mounted on horses, that is, an army composed of cavalry. Let's find a nation with such a history, and examine the historical connections between the two nations mentioned in Ezekiel and Revelation. The Gog and Magog, mentioned in the book of Revelation, are often interpreted as the final northern coalition attacking God's people. In other words, they are defined as the worldwide forces of evil opposing God. First, we will examine whether there is a historical parallel to the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. Then, we will examine the historical connections between the characters of these names, which appear in both Ezekiel and Revelation. In the next lecture, we will examine chapter 6, section 2, Gog's cavalry, in Revelation and World History. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and World History. Hello, this is the 41st lecture on Revelation and World History. In the last lecture, we completed chapters 1 through 5 of Revelation and World History. In chapters 1 and 2, we explored the identity of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. We learned that the 7-headed beast refers to the Soviet Union, which was ruled by 7 supreme rulers for 70 years. In the prophetic books and the book of Revelation, this empire is referred to as Babylon. In the book of Revelation, along with the Babylonian Empire, another invading nation appears. That is, Gog and Magog. In the last lecture, we looked at the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. Through this, we should explore the connection between the Babylonian Empire and Gog and Magog. In this lecture, we will explore the Gog cavalry that appears in world history. Revelation and World History, Chapter 6, Section 2. Gog's cavalry. You will come from the northernmost parts of your land, with many peoples, a great multitude, all riding on horses, and a mighty army. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 15. First, Gog's army is a great multitude, all riding on horses, meaning that it is entirely composed of cavalry. They wear armor and carry shields and use bows. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 4, Ezekiel chapter 39 verse 9. Typically, the armies of ancient nations were composed of a mix of infantry and cavalry. It is very rare to find an army composed entirely of cavalry. Among ancient peoples, the Scythians were known for their excellent archery skills and cavalry tactics. The Scythians were a nomadic people who lived in the northern steppes of the Persian Empire. Herodotus's Histories describes how Darius, who conquered Babylon, embarked on a Scythian expedition and investigated the history and customs of the Scythians, who primarily lived along the northern shores of the Black Sea. The Scythian customs of warfare are as follows. Scythians drink the blood of the first enemy they defeat. Furthermore, they cut off the heads of all enemy soldiers killed in battle and bring them to the king. Bringing a head allows one to participate in the distribution of spoils. But, without one cannot. The Scythians flayed the head in the following manner. Cut a circle around both ears, then shake the head to remove the scalp from the skull. Then, using the ox's ribs, they strip the flesh from the hide. And, when they touch the leather with their hands and soften it, a kind of handkerchief is made. And, they tie it to their horse's bridle and show it off. This is because the one with the most of these handkerchiefs is considered the greatest warrior. Furthermore, many Scythians sewed the flayed hide into a garment similar to a shepherd's coat and wore it as an upper garment. Moreover, they stripped off the skin and fingernails of the dead enemy's right arm and wrapped them around the quiver. Furthermore, many stripped the skin from their torsos, spread it out, and laid it on their saddles. Referred to, Herodotus's history. Due to these customs, the Scythians were known as a very cruel and ferocious people. The Scythians, a fierce nomadic people, lived in tents pulled by oxen. The number of horses owned determined wealth. When fighting, they wore Greek-style bronze armor and helmets, along with scale-woven garments underneath. They formed lightly armed cavalry armed with Achanax-style daggers or bows and arrows. They possessed excellent mobility and skillful tactics, capable of harassing their formidable Persian enemies. We referred to the Scythian section of Pascal's World Encyclopedia. The Scythian army comprised of cavalry corps. Wearing armor and wielding swords and bows, closely resembles the description of the army of Gog and Magog. Rumors of these mounted warriors, who had spread from southern Russia and Ukraine to the Dnieper River since the 7th century BC, were known even at the time of the writing of Ezekiel, and may have served as the basis for the text. However, since the Scythians never conquered Jerusalem, after the Babylonian and Persian periods, this cannot be considered a fulfillment of the prophecy. If these events had occurred during the Roman era, in order for the Gog to capture Jerusalem, a battle with the Roman army was inevitable, as Palestine was part of the Roman Empire at the time. An example of such an incident is the Attila's invasion of Rome by the Huns. This incident was called God's Whip in the West at the time. We refer to Reinhold Neumann Hodetz's Genghis Khan. Attila, the Hunnic emperor, called God's Curse by the Romans, conquered Gaul in 451. He built a vast empire stretching from the Chinese border to Gaul. But his death brought its end. We referred to Jin Gurney's Roots and History of the Roman Empire. Although Attila failed to destroy the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire fell a few years later, in 476 AD. From the perspective of the Christian Western Roman Empire, Attila could be compared to Gog, the king of Magog, who invaded from the north. However, Attila also did not set foot on the land of Jerusalem. Aside from the Roman Empire, the countries that occupied Jerusalem were various Arab dynasties and the Ottoman Empire. The Byzantine Empire, a Christian nation, was destroyed by the Ottoman Empire. However, the Ottoman Empire is not the same country as Magog, which appears in the text of Ezekiel. And it is not a country that conquered the Great Plains, Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 11. We must look for the history of a nation comprised of an army all mounted on horses among the well-known histories. Gog is a royal title, and Magog is the name of the country ruled by Gog. Here's something to consider first. When the Old Testament was first written in Hebrew, vowels were not recorded in Hebrew. Hebrew is a language with only 22 consonants, no vowels at all. Except for occasional consonantal symbols to indicate long vowels. Readers pronounce the text as it was orally transmitted. Around 450 or 500 AD, when the Talmud was nearly completed, scribes and scholars began to rigorously mark the text to ensure its correct pronunciation. We refer to Norman K. Godwald's Social Justice and the Hebrew Bible. Later, by the Masoretes, who were active from the 7th to the 11th centuries. As vowel symbols were added to the consonant body, vowelization became fixed. We referred to the Introduction to the Old Testament, published by the Christian Literature Society of Korea. Until then, vowel pronunciations were transmitted orally. It's true that, if a specific noun isn't accurately transmitted from the beginning, its vowel can change over time. The only things that remain unchanged are the consonantal notations that were preserved from the beginning. In other words, in Gog and Magog, only the consonantal pronunciations of Gog and Magog remain, G and MG. Then, we've found a clue. We just need to find a country whose army is made up of cavalry and whose name starts with MG. One of them is the Malgal, a tribe that existed in the northern part of the ancient Korean peninsula. The Malgal were a people who inhabited the forests and mountainous regions of Manchuria, the Maritime Province, and the Heilongjiang River. There are numerous records of them, incorporating themselves into the military of Goguryeo, or sometimes operating cavalry units to fight against it. While the Malgal were not a purely nomadic horsemen, they can be understood as a northern horseman, and hunters with a strong horsemanship culture. Among the countries well known to Koreans, there is another country with a similar name. That country is the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. The initials of the country's name are identical to MG. And the Mongolian army is the only one, composed entirely of cavalry with no infantry. Furthermore, Genghis Khan's Mongol army formed a vast empire that covered nearly half the world at the time. The title of the leader is Khan, which is a title that begins with K. Gog, the king of Magog, is synonymous with Khan, the king of the Mongols. The pronunciation is the same in Korea's Hangul Bible. Gog is pronounced G or K, and Magog is pronounced MG or MK, which is the same pronunciation as Khan of the Mongols. The consonant pronunciation of Gog is Gyeog, which is identical to the English K. In fact, in ancient Korean history, the title Gon was used by the rulers of Silla and Gaya. This title is the same as the Chinese character Han, used by Genghis Khan, and corresponds to the leader of the steppe nomads. In Korean, shield is pronounced as gon, and sweat as han. Coincidentally, in Korean, when gyeog and hyus meet, they are pronounced as kyug. Park Hyuk-ko-se, the founding father of Silla, also had the title Ko-so-gon, indicating that this title was identical to that of these steppe nomads. The predecessor of the Ottoman Turkic tribe, the Turk, was the Dal Kual. The term Dal Kual was used because the original pronunciation was translated into Chinese characters, using characters with similar pronunciations. When transcribing these characters into Korean Hangul, using the IDU method, they are pronounced as Dal Kual. The title of the chieftain of this Gokturk tribe is also Gahan. The posthumous title, Tae Daegak Gon, was bestowed upon General Kim Yu-sin, who unified the three kingdoms of the Korean peninsula. Gak Gon and Ga Han originated from the same pronunciation, transcribed into Chinese characters. This is Dae Ga Khan, or Dae Khan, which in grassland nomadic societies meant the leader of several tribes. Magog and Mongo, or Mongolia, share the same consonantal letters, but differ only in vowels. This phenomenon of vowel shift, where the same vowel is pronounced differently in a word, is common even in modern times. This phenomenon can also be seen in the Mughal Empire, which claimed to be a descendant of the Mongol Empire. Mughal is a modified, Indo-Persian pronunciation of Mongol. Mughal is also the same word as Mongol, with the only difference being the pronunciation of the vowels, and the consonant value being the same as mg. In the Mongolian steppe, the leader of a clan is called a Khan. The heads of several clans gather together and elect a representative to serve as the leader of the entire clan, who is called the Great Khan. Genghis Khan's original name was Temujin. He united the scattered tribes of Mongolia and ascended to the position of Great Khan of the entire tribe. And he was given a new title, Genghis Khan. If Magog is considered Mongolia, then Gog, king of Magog, is synonymous with Genghis Khan, great king of the Mongol Empire. If so, we should look at the process of expansion of the Mongol Empire, led by Genghis Khan. And we will compare the war of conquest against Gog, the king of Magog, mentioned in the text of Ezekiel. The Gog and Magog, mentioned in the book of Revelation, are often interpreted as the final northern coalition attacking God's people. In other words, they are defined as the worldwide forces of evil opposing God. We have discovered a comparable entity in world history to the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. That entity was the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. We will examine the connection between Gog and Magog, or the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan, and the Babylonian Empire, mentioned in the book of prophecy within world history. In the next lecture, we will examine Chapter 6, Section 3, Gog's army and the War of Conquest, in Revelation and world history. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history. Hello, this is the 42nd lecture on Revelation and world history. In the prophetic books and the book of Revelation, an empire appears that invades Israel and its surrounding nations. This empire is called Babylon. And in the book of Revelation, along with the Babylonian Empire, another invading nation appears. That nation is Gog and Magog. Last time, we looked at the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. Gog is the title of the king who rules over the land of Magog. Gog's army is described as consisting solely of cavalry. A nation with a similar structure to this description once appeared in history. It was the Mongol Empire built by Genghis Khan. By examining this history in detail, we should understand the connection between the Babylonian Empire and Gog and Magog. In this lecture, we will explore Gog's army and wars of conquest as they appear in world history. Revelation and World History, Chapter 6, Section 3. Gog's army and the war of conquest. You will come from the northernmost parts of your land, with many peoples, all riding on horses, a great multitude, a mighty army. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 15. The Mongol Empire's army consisted entirely of cavalry. The Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan established the largest empire in human history. They conquered most of the northern hemisphere from the northernmost parts. That is, from the easternmost part of the northern hemisphere to Europe in the west, excluding parts of Europe. Be prepared, you and all the hordes gathered around you. And you shall be their leader. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 7. The person corresponding to you refers to Gog, the leader of the land of Magog. The term he refers to Temujin, who ascended to the throne of the Mongol Empire under the title of Genghis Khan. Temujin conquered the Naimans and Merkits, who were obstacles to the unification of the scattered Mongol tribes. In 1206, his followers held a grand assembly at the foot of the Onon River to celebrate their victory. They raised a white flag with 9 tails and bestowed upon Temujin the title Genghis Khan, placing him on the throne. We referred to Ratsnevsky's Genghis Khan, hero of the Mongolian steppe. After many days, in the last days, you will be commanded to come to the land, to the mountains of Israel, which have long been desolate. The people of the land have escaped the sword, and are gathered from many countries. They have come from foreign lands, and are living in peace. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 8. After ascending to the throne as Great Khan, Genghis Khan devoted himself for a time to internal unity and political stability on the Mongolian steppe. He then launched a war of conquest, attacking the Western Shah, founded by the Tangut people, and the Jin dynasty, founded by the Jurchen people of Manchuria. The Jin dynasty destroyed the northern Song, the northern part of China's Song dynasty, and took over northern China, where numerous Jurchen people migrated and settled in the Central Plains. The Mongol Empire, founded by Genghis Khan and his successors, destroyed the Jin dynasty and established the Yuan dynasty. The Mongol army also destroyed the Principality of Kiev. The region was also under the rule of the Mongol Empire for over 200 years. Russians refer to this period of Mongol rule as the Tatar yoke. We referred to Kim Kyung-mook's Story of Russian History. I will put a hook in your mouth and drag you out. I will bring out with you a great multitude, all in full armor, carrying shields and bucklers, and holding swords. Ezekiel chapter 38 verses 4 to 6. You will go up, you and all your hordes, and the many peoples with you, like a storm, covering the land like a cloud. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 9. This depicts the Mongolian army in full gear. The following is a transcription of Reinhold Neumann Hoditz's description of Mongol cavalry tactics in his book. The swift movements of the cavalry, the precision of the mounted archers, the well-trained common warriors, and the tactics employed by Genghis Khan and his generals. These were the very things that made the Mongols victorious. Every cavalryman carried 1 or 2 bows and many arrows in his quiver. Additionally, they were armed with, depending on their preference, curved swords, iron clubs, hooks used to dislodge enemies from their saddles, and spears with lassos made of horsehair. They wore helmets with neck guards, and armor made of long, blackened leather. In this guise, these wild warriors soared from the underworld to the surface, riding on horses as small but tireless as themselves, and suddenly galloped close. In silence, they advanced their forces across a vast front. After pretending to remain still for a while, they would soon launch an attack, accompanied by a signal from their standard bearers, and a roar of hellish roar. Genghis Khan's military theory continued. Attacks must surprise the enemy, and disperse their forces as much as possible. Special forces were tasked with ambushing and setting traps, much like hunting wild animals on the steppes. A favorite tactic was a feigned retreat. In such cases, the Mongols would often elude the enemy for days, until their attention was distracted. Then, when the opportunity arose, they would mount new horses and launch an attack. In their feigned retreats, the Mongols often dispersed far enough to bypass the enemy without detection. It was not uncommon for them to conceal themselves by setting fires in the dry steppe. Then, through the flames and smoke, they begin their attack. In any case, these incredibly agile cavalrymen achieved victory by riding their horses and shooting arrows with precision. Of course, Genghis Khan's fundamental principle was never to commit his entire army to a single battle. Therefore, the defeat of one unit does not jeopardize the entire strategy. In areas to be conquered, he further divided his forces into smaller units, each with its own mission, according to the overall plan. When these units moved together, victory was assured. The sandstorms that Genghis Khan's army stirred up as it passed were like those caused by a storm. We refer to Reinhold Neumann Hoditz's Genghis Khan. Their armies passed like clouds, leaving no dynasty in the land they passed through. The phrase, "I will put a hook in your mouth and bring you down," means, God will put a hook in your mouth and bring you down. This is a statement that He cannot refuse and will obey the command, which implies that this prophecy will definitely come true. Coincidentally, the military equipment used by the Mongol army also included these hooks. Let's take a closer look at Ezekiel chapter 38. Thus says the Lord God, on that day, thoughts will come into your mind, and you will devise an evil plan. You will say, I will go up against the cities of the plain. I will go up against a people who live securely, all of them without walls, gates, or bars. I will take plunder and plunder, then you will lift up your hand against the desolate, inhabited lands, against the peoples. Then you will lift up your hand against the desolate, inhabited lands, against the peoples who have gathered from the nations, who have acquired livestock and goods, and who live in the center of the earth. The merchants of Sheba, Dedan, and Tarshish, with their wealth, will say to you, have you come for plunder? Are you going to take silver and gold, to take livestock and goods, and to carry off a great plunder? Ezekiel chapter 38 verses 10 to 13. I will go up against the cities of the plain. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 11. Genghis Khan's army grew right on the Great Plains. The nomads of the grasslands do not build castles, but live in portable tents, moving seasonally in search of pastures for their livestock. The people who inhabit the center of the world. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 12. You might ask, if the earth is round, where is the center of the world? This is similar to asking, in all countries, the sun rises in the east. Where is the land of the east where the sun rises? However, we learned that the land of the east, where the sun rises, refers to a country like the Korean Peninsula, located on the international dateline, and thus the first country to greet the new day on the calendar. At one point, the British Empire declared itself the land where the sun never sets, positioning itself directly in the center of the international dateline, and thus portraying itself as the center of the world. Thus, the line passing through the center of the meridian circle of the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, England, was designated as the meridian. So, the other side of the Earth was designated as the international dateline. Therefore, the country located directly next to the international dateline, where the calendar begins earliest, becomes the country where the sun rises. However, the country at the center of the world, mentioned in this text, refers to present-day China. The name of the country, China, was created using the character zhong, which means middle. In other words, the country's name contains the meaning that the country is the center of the world. This China was also trampled by the hooves of the Mongol army, and the Jin dynasty was destroyed. As a result, a new dynasty, the Yuan dynasty, was established under the rule of the Mongols. Since ancient times, the nomads of the grasslands, located in northern China, have been a source of concern for China. They would suddenly invade China on horseback, plunder its treasures, and then quickly flee north. Therefore, the Great Wall of China was built to defend against invasions by these northern nomads. However, even this Great Wall ultimately succumbed to the Mongols' cavalry tactics. Gog will invade and take away silver and gold. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 13. Coincidentally, the name of China when it was destroyed by the Mongols was none other than Jin dynasty, that is, gold. The Gog and Magog, mentioned in the book of Revelation, are often interpreted as the final northern coalition attacking God's people. In other words, they are defined as the worldwide forces of evil opposing God. We have discovered a comparable entity in world history to the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. That entity was the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. We will examine the connection between Gog and Magog, or the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan, and the Babylonian Empire, mentioned in the Book of Prophecy within world history. In the next lecture, we will learn about Chapter 6, Section 4, of Revelation and World History, the nation defeated by the army of Gog. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history. Hello, this is the 43rd lecture on Revelation and world history. In the prophetic books and the book of Revelation, an empire appears that invades Israel and its surrounding nations. This empire is called Babylon. And in the book of Revelation, along with the Babylonian Empire, another invading nation appears. That nation is Gog and Magog. Last time, we looked at the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. Gog is the title of the king who rules over the land of Magog. Gog's army is described as consisting solely of cavalry. A nation with a similar structure to this description once appeared in history. It was the Mongol Empire built by Genghis Khan. By examining this history in detail, we should understand the connection between the Babylonian Empire and Gog and Magog. In this lecture, we'll explore the nations defeated by the Gog's army that appear in world history. Revelation and World History, Chapter 6, Section 4. The nations defeated by Gog's army. I will bring down Gomer and all its hordes, and the Togarmah clan in the far north, with all its hordes, a multitude of peoples with you. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 6. Among the peoples who belonged to or were defeated by Gog, the king of Magog is the Togarmah clan. If you look at the initials of the consonants, excluding the vowels, you will see a similar name. This is the Gokturk tribe mentioned earlier. The initials of Turk are D and Gyeog in Korean, which are identical to Dogol. Coincidentally, this also matches remarkably well when read in Korean. You can see that the initials of Magog in Mongolia and Dogol in Turk. Togarmah is the same as the current name, Turkmen. They are a people who were defeated by the Mongol army, or were incorporated into it. Among the names of the republics that comprised the Soviet Union, there is also Turkmenistan, which refers to the same ethnicity. Thus says the Lord God, Gog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 3. A place with a pronunciation similar to Tubal is Tobolsk. Except for the place, name suffix, Tubal and Tobol can be considered identical. Tobolsk is a city in Tyumen Oblast, Russia, and was the site of Iskul, the capital of the Sibir Khanate, founded by these Mongols. The regional name, Siberia, also derives from the Russian term, Sibir. Tobolsk, located east of the Ural Mountains, is a strategically important geographical point, crossing from Asia to Europe. This area was also occupied by Genghis Khan's army, Rus. An ethnic group with a name similar to Rus is Rus. Rus was the name given to the Swedish Vikings who settled in Russia. They later founded Kievan Rus, the origin of Russia. The current name, Russia, also means land of the Rus. This Kievan Rus was defeated and destroyed by the Mongols. And, until the Grand Duchy of Moscow emerged as a powerful nation, it remained under the Tatar yoke. This suggests that the last remaining name, Meshech, has the same pronunciation as Moscow. Schofield, a leading figure in the dispensationalist school, interpreted Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 2. The land of Gog and Magog was interpreted as referring to the northern powers led by Russia. We refer to the commentary on Ezekiel chapter 38 in the Schofield Annotated Bible. Thus, those who agreed with this interpretation during the Soviet era also interpreted it as a Soviet invasion of Israel. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, commentaries discussing scenarios like a Soviet invasion of Israel became less common. Everett Carver, in his Encyclopedia of End Times, asserts regarding Schofield's interpretation, similar spellings are no basis for equating two words. We refer to Everett Carver's Encyclopedia of End Times. However, the author of Revelation in World History emphasizes again here, it is not false, it is true. Schofield misinterpreted the past history of the Mongol Empire as the current Soviet Empire. Furthermore, Everett Carver completely ruled out the possibility of a similar name, thereby missing the opportunity to find it in history. For example, when excavating Tutankhamun's tomb in Egypt, one person found a similar site but miscalculated the depth and direction, and another declared there can be no royal tomb there, thus missing the opportunity to find it. In his commentary on Ezekiel, Eichert stated, "There is absolutely no name in history comparable to the one in the text." We refer to Eichert's commentary on Ezekiel chapter 38. However, we have found a history of the Mongol Empire that is not merely similar to the history described in the text, but completely consistent with the text's description. The biography of Genghis Khan is already well known in the West. However, the statement that no name with such a history is known may be because he was unaware of the history of the Mongol Empire, or because he referred to them as Tatars or Turks rather than Mongols. Furthermore, since names in the prophetic books are often symbolic, it may be puzzling that names with identical pronunciations are recorded. However, there is absolutely no reason to doubt the clear history and the identical names. Even more so when read in Korean, we can see that they match without a single inch of error. The number of names, corresponding to 666, is also interpreted in Korean. Furthermore, the names of the seas, which flow half to the East Sea and half to the West Sea, are the immutable names of the seas that have been used in Korea since ancient times, East Sea and West Sea. The country corresponding to Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38 is the Mongol Empire, and the country corresponding to Babylon in the Book of Revelation is the Soviet Union. Finding the connection between these two nations is a key focus of interpreting the prophetic texts. The Gog and Magog, mentioned in the Book of Revelation, are often interpreted as the final northern coalition attacking God's people. In other words, they are defined as the worldwide forces of evil opposing God. We have discovered a comparable entity in world history to the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. That entity was the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. We will examine the connection between Gog and Magog, or the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan, and the Babylonian Empire, mentioned in the Book of Prophecy within world history. In the next lecture, we will learn about Magog and Babylon, chapter 6, section 5, of Revelation and world history. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history. Hello, this is the 44th lecture on Revelation and World History. In the prophetic books and the book of Revelation, an empire appears that invades Israel and its surrounding nations. This empire is called Babylon. And in the book of Revelation, along with the Babylonian Empire, another invading nation appears. That nation is Gog and Magog. Last time, we looked at the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. Gog is the title of the king who rules over the land of Magog. Gog's army is described as consisting solely of cavalry. A nation with a similar structure to this description once appeared in history. It was the Mongol Empire built by Genghis Khan. By examining this history in detail, we should understand the connection between the Babylonian Empire and Gog and Magog. In this lecture, we will explore the connection between Magog and Babylon. Revelation and World History, Chapter 6, Section 5. Magog and Babylon. The term Gog and Magog, mentioned in detail in Ezekiel chapter 38, reappears in Revelation chapter 20. We need to understand the connection between the Mongol Empire and the Soviet Union, and why they are mentioned in the book of Revelation. To understand this, we must examine the territories and histories occupied by the two empires. First, we must examine the largest territory occupied by the Mongol Empire. It occupied a vast territory stretching from the easternmost point of the Korean Peninsula, through China and Central Asia, and into Russia and Eastern Europe. And the second is the territory occupied by the Soviet Union. Looking at a map, we can see that the Soviet Union stood on the very lands traversed by the Mongols' horseshoes. The Central Asian republics, annexed by the Soviet Union, were all countries that had been ruled by the Mongol Empire. And these are the very countries that gained independence as part of the Commonwealth of Independent States after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. China, once under Mongol rule, also became a communist state. And we can see that the paths traversed by the Mongol army were all communist in the 20th century. All the dynasties in the territories occupied by the Mongols were destroyed. The only country that survived defeat by the Mongols was the Goryeo dynasty on the Korean Peninsula. They invaded 7 times over a period of 30 years. But they resisted to the end, refusing to surrender. As a result, they signed peace treaties and were able to preserve their dynasty. Recognizing that they could not completely suppress Korean resistance, the Mongols sought a compromise. The Goryeo dynasty, concerned about the suffering of its people due to war, accepted a certain degree of bowing to the enemy. As a result, all the dynasties conquered by the Mongol army were destroyed. However, Goryeo was able to maintain its dynasty. This could be seen as a half-defeat, and coincidentally, only North Korea, half of the Korean peninsula, fell to communism. This is truly an amazing and strange history. Thus, the history of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel serves as a preliminary model for the history of Babylon, described in the book of Revelation. This is a foreshadowing of the land where Babylon will appear in the future. The Principality of Kiev was destroyed by the Mongols. The Principality of Moscow, which later grew, became the Russian Empire, expanding its borders to Siberia and the easternmost Korean peninsula. The Mongol army of the 13th century can be seen as guiding the path that the Russian Empire would expand. And, in the 20th century, Russia became a communist country. With Japan's defeat in the Pacific War, a trusteeship was established over the Korean Peninsula by both the United States and the Soviet Union. As a result, the Korean peninsula was cut in half, and its northern half came under the influence of the Red Empire. Even Mongolia, which claimed to be the descendants of Genghis Khan, the founder of the great empire, was unable to defy the tide of history, and was eventually forced to establish a communist regime, becoming a satellite state of the Soviet Union. The beast that came up out of the sea, Revelation chapter 13 verse 1. The first beast in the book of Revelation is said to have risen from the sea. This term for sea is also closely related to the Mongolian people. Mongols have long been fond of the word sea. We referenced Shibo Ryoteros, the Mongolian steppe. However, there is no sea in Mongolia. Perhaps the name sea refers to the vast, open grasslands. So, Jamuka, who was Genghis Khan's childhood friend and political enemy, used the title meaning Lord of the Four Seas. We referred to Ratneski's Genghis Khan, hero of the Mongolian steppes. This suggests that the Mongols referred to the land they inhabited as sea. Furthermore, the title Genghis Khan is known to include the meaning of sea. The following is a description of this, by Reinhold Neumann Hoditz. The origin and meaning of the term Genghis are not fully known. Most scholars accept Peliot's theory as the established theory. Peliot argued that Genghis is derived from the Turkish word Tengiz, meaning ocean. Moreover, it was claimed that the corresponding Mongolian word, Dali, became Dalai Lama, a title for the successors of Genghis Khan, and great figures in the spiritual world. Tengiz, or Lake Baikal, is a huge sea that holds the legends of the Mongolian people. Lake Baikal plays an important role in the origins of Mongolia. Ultimately, this title could be said to have originally meant, like a vast sea, the ruler of all Mongols. But later, with Genghis Khan's endless victories stretching far and wide, the meaning of ruler of the world was added to it. We refer to Reinhold Neumann Hoditz's Genghis Khan. In the book of Revelation, it is described as a beast rising out of the sea. This is precisely what it means. The territory this beast ruled overlaps with the territory of the Mongol Empire, which ruled the seas. And so, this beast was born on the foundation of that history. Even today, when we refer to the world, we call it the East and the West. That is, in Chinese characters, it is called East Sea and West Sea. This Mongol Empire was a great empire that spanned two seas, that is, two continents, the East and the West. It was precisely upon these seas that the communist states of the 20th century were built. Therefore, the book of Revelation states that this beast emerged from the sea. Therefore, the reference to Gog and Magog in the book of Revelation can be said to be closely related to the historical prophecy of Gog and Magog in the book of Ezekiel. The Gog and Magog, mentioned in the book of Revelation, are often interpreted as the final northern coalition attacking God's people. In other words, they are defined as the worldwide forces of evil opposing God. We have discovered a comparable entity in world history to the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. That entity was the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. We have examined the connection between the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan, which corresponds to Gog and Magog, and the Babylonian Empire that appears in the book of prophecy within world history. The Babylon mentioned in Revelation is the Soviet Union, and the Gog and Magog mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38 is the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. The Soviet Union built a communist state on the very foundation of the Mongol Empire. In the next lecture, we will examine Chapter 6, Section 6, Magog's invasion of Israel, from Revelation and world history. It was the Bible History School. if you subscribe and set up notifications. You can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history. Hello, this is the 45th lecture on Revelation and world history. In the prophetic books and the book of Revelation, an empire appears that invades Israel and its surrounding nations. This empire is called Babylon. And in the book of Revelation, along with the Babylonian Empire, another invading nation appears. That nation is Gog and Magog. Last time, we looked at the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. Gog is the title of the king who rules over the land of Magog. Gog's army is described as consisting solely of cavalry. A nation with a similar structure to this description once appeared in history. It was the Mongol Empire built by Genghis Khan. The Babylonian Empire in the book of Revelation is the Soviet Union. And Gog and Magog in Ezekiel is the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. In the very places where the Mongol Empire's horseshoes trod in the 13th century. Communist states were established in the 20th century. In this lecture, we will explore Magog's invasion of Israel. Revelation and World History, Chapter 6, Section 6. Magog's invasion of Israel. Now, the last remaining prophecy is that Gog's army will invade Israel. Let's examine where that will be. Let's examine Ezekiel chapter 39. Therefore, Son of man, prophesy against Gog, and say to him, Thus says the sovereign Lord, Behold, I am against you, Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, and bring you back from the far north. And I will bring you back to the mountains of Israel. I will strike your bow, so that it falls from your left hand, and your arrows from your right. You will fall on the mountains of Israel, you and all your hordes and the people who are with you. You will fall in the wilderness, for I have spoken it, declares the sovereign Lord. I will send fire on Magog, and on those who live securely in the isles, and they will know that I am the Lord. I will make my holy name known among my people Israel, and my holy name will never again be profaned. Behold, the day will come and be accomplished, declares the Lord God, this is the day of which I spoke. Those who live in the cities of Israel will go out and burn their weapons with fire, shields and bucklers, bows and arrows, clubs and spears, for 7 years. They will not gather wood from the field, or cut down trees from the forests, because they will light fires with their weapons. On that day I will give Gog, the land of Israel, the valley east of the sea, through which the people pass, as a burial place for his army. The way through which they pass will be blocked. There, they will bury Gog and all his multitude, and it will be called the Valley of Hamon-Gog. The house of Israel will bury them for 7 months, purifying the land. All the people of the land will bury them, and the land will be given a new name because of them. This is the day when my glory will be revealed, says the Lord God, Ezekiel chapter 39 verses 1 to 13. In Ezekiel chapter 39 verse 11, we find a nickname for the land of Israel. They call it, east of the sea, a valley where people pass. So, we must first determine where east of the sea is. We previously saw in chapter 6, section 2, that the Gog army refers to the Mongol army. So, this, east of the sea, is also a place somewhere in the land, where the Mongol army passed. Earlier, in chapter 4, section 3, we learned that the Korean Peninsula is a country that belongs to the Northern Hemisphere. and also corresponds to the east where the sun rises. This east of the sea is also a term associated with the Korean Peninsula. Since ancient times, China has called the Korean Peninsula, located across the Yellow Sea, the Eastern Sea of China, Haedong-dongag, an eastern country located east of the sea. This term, used in mainland China, was also used on the Korean Peninsula, even giving the name Haedong-tongbo, Dongguk-tongbo, to coins from the Goryeo dynasty. The east of the sea is a synonym for the Korean Peninsula. On that day, I will give Gog, the land of Israel east of the sea, as a burial place. It is a valley through which men pass, and the path of the army of Gog will be blocked. Ezekiel chapter 39 verse 11. This place is also called the Valley of the Passage, and there is ample reason for this. The Korean Peninsula is mountainous, covering 70% of its land area, making it a land shaped like a large valley. However, this name refers to the Korean Peninsula's geopolitical position rather than its geographical shape. This is because continental powers had to transit through the Korean Peninsula to advance to the sea. Furthermore, maritime powers could only advance to the continent by establishing a bridgehead on the Korean Peninsula, making it crucial as a military route. In fact, after occupying the Korean Peninsula, the Mongolian army formed the Goryeo-Mongol Allied Forces to conquer the Japanese archipelago, a maritime power. They launched two invasions of Japan in 1274 and 1281. Their military routes did not use direct sea routes from the continent to the Japanese archipelago, but instead passed through the Korean Peninsula and its southern coast before reaching the Japanese archipelago. However, the Mongol plans to conquer Japan were repeatedly thwarted by typhoons. Japan named this typhoon the Divine Wind that protected the Japanese archipelago. We referred to Kim Hee-young's Story of Japanese History. During the Pacific War, the name of the Japanese Navy's suicide squad was also kamikaze. Thus, the Mongol advance into Japan was frustrated, and the Mongol army was unable to advance beyond the Korean Peninsula. And the Mongol army was unable to advance beyond the Korean Peninsula. The way of travel will be blocked. Ezekiel chapter 39 verse 11. This refers to a situation where the advance of foreign troops on the Korean Peninsula has come to a halt. In 1592, over 300 years after, the Mongol Empire invaded the Japanese archipelago. Japan launched the Imjin War and invaded the Korean Peninsula. However, the slogan Japan used at the time was Jungmyeong-ga-do. This means, we, Japan, are going to attack the Ming dynasty, so please lend us your country, Joseon. But the real meaning is, you Joseon are no match for us, so don't resist and get out of the way. We referred to Kim Hee-young's Story of Japanese History. What's noteworthy here is that they considered the Korean Peninsula as a passageway. In reality, with the navigation technology of the time, it was nearly impossible to move troops directly from the Japanese archipelago to the Chinese mainland. Even if Japan were to go directly to war with China without going through the Korean Peninsula, Japan would be at a significant military disadvantage if the South Korean Navy attacked from behind. Therefore, conquering the continent was only possible after pacifying the Korean Peninsula. However, despite the 7-Year War, Japan ultimately suffered a fatal blow from Admiral Yi Sun-sin and was defeated. The Japanese army could no longer reach the continent. They were unable to advance and stopped in the valleys of the Korean Peninsula. The passage was blocked at the Korean Peninsula. Furthermore, Imperial Russia attempted to expand eastward to develop an ice-free port in the east. Russia advanced as far as Siberia, but its advance ended at the Tumen River, which forms the border of the Korean Peninsula. The passage of the Russian army also ended at the Korean Peninsula. Thus, the Korean Peninsula historically serves as a passage valley for continental and maritime powers. The Sino-Japanese War broke out in 1894. And in 1904, the Russo-Japanese War broke out. These wars took place on and around the Korean Peninsula during the late Joseon dynasty. Both wars were clashes between continental and maritime powers. And coincidentally, the battlefield was the Korean Peninsula. In our previous lecture, Chapter 6, Section 3, we saw that in the interpretation of Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 12. Among the nations conquered by Gog's army was the people who inhabit the center of the earth, that is, China. And Ezekiel chapter 39 verse 6 contains another expression referring to another place. Those who live peacefully on the island. The island nation that the Mongol army went to conquer was Japan. Both of these two nations used the Korean Peninsula as a passage valley. But their advance was blocked by the Korean Peninsula, preventing them from advancing further. The prophecy states that history takes place in the East, or Asia. The center of Asia is Central Asia. The countries in Central Asia became the republics that formed the Soviet Union. And after the Soviet Union's dissolution, they became members of the CIS. Furthermore, China, which called itself Zhongguo, meaning the center of the world, also became a communist state. The country east of the sea, seen from China, is the Korean Peninsula. The Korean Peninsula is the easternmost country in Asia, the easternmost of all northern countries. In the text of the prophecy, Japan is referred to as an island nation. The Gog and Magog, mentioned in the book of Revelation, are often interpreted as the final northern coalition attacking God's people. In other words, they are defined as the worldwide forces of evil opposing God. We have discovered a comparable entity in world history to the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. That entity was the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. We have examined the connection between the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan, which corresponds to Gog and Magog, and the Babylonian Empire that appears in the book of prophecy within world history. The Babylon mentioned in Revelation is the Soviet Union. And the Gog and Magog, mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38, is the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. The Soviet Union built a communist state on the very foundation of the Mongol Empire. In the next lecture, we will explore Chapter 6, Section 7, Two Kinds of War, in Revelation and World History. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history. Hello, this is the 46th lecture on Revelation and world history. In the prophetic books and the book of Revelation, an empire appears that invades Israel and its surrounding nations. This empire is called Babylon. And in the book of Revelation, along with the Babylonian Empire, another invading nation appears. That nation is Gog and Magog. Last time, we looked at the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. Gog is the title of the king who rules over the land of Magog. Gog's army is described as consisting solely of cavalry. A nation with a similar structure to this description once appeared in history. It was the Mongol Empire built by Genghis Khan. The Babylonian Empire in the Book of Revelation is the Soviet Union. And Gog and Magog in Ezekiel is the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. In the very places where the Mongol Empire's horseshoes trod in the 13th century, communist states were established in the 20th century. In this lecture, we will explore two kinds of war. Revelation and World History, Chapter 6, Section 7. Two types of war. The first war. On that day, I will give Gog, the land of Israel, the valley east of the sea, through which the people pass, as a burial place for his army. The way through which they pass will be blocked. There, they will bury Gog and all his multitude, and it will be called the Valley of Gog. The house of Israel will bury them for 7 months, to cleanse the land. Ezekiel chapter 39 verses 11 to 12. The second war. Those who live in the cities of Israel will go out and burn their weapons with fire, shields and bucklers, bows and arrows, clubs and spears, for 7 years. They will not gather wood from the field, or cut down trees from the forests, because they will kindle fires with their weapons. Ezekiel chapter 39 verses 9 to 10. The text describes two types of war: a war to bury the enemy for 7 months, and a war to burn the enemy's weapons for 7 years. This is evident from the previous statement in Ezekiel chapter 39 verse 6. God will send fire on Magog and on the people who live securely in the isles. This refers to God's punishment of the two forces that invaded Israel, Magog and the people who live securely on the islands. Gog and Magog refer to the Mongol Empire, founded by Genghis Khan. And the people who live securely on the islands refers to none other than Japan. Japan is an island nation, surrounded by the sea on all sides, a natural fortress. It was never invaded or occupied by foreign powers in ancient times. The Mongol Empire attempted to conquer Japan, but failed. Later, Japan also fought the Sino-Japanese War, with the Qing dynasty, a continental power. Next, Japan fought the Russo-Japanese War with Russia. In this way, Japan is also a very important country, as the history of conflict between continental and maritime powers repeats itself. Mongolia and Japan are both countries that invaded the Korean Peninsula. And this is a prophetic word that God will punish them in return for their invasion. The first is the Mongol invasion of the Korean Peninsula. The phrase 7 months in the text does not refer to the war lasting 7 months. The Mongol invasion of the Korean Peninsula was not a one-time event. It occurred 7 times, beginning in 1231 and ending in 1259, when Goryeo surrendered. We referred to history of war experienced by the Korean people. The war between Goryeo and the Mongols did not end in one fell swoop. That doesn't mean the war lasted 30 years. Each time the Mongols invaded Goryeo, they were blocked by Goryeo's resistance and were unable to subdue it. And this act of reorganizing the military and invading again was repeated 7 times over a period of 30 years. Despite numerous attempts to conquer the Korean Peninsula, the Mongols faced persistent resistance and were unable to completely conquer Goryeo. Finally, they secured Goryeo's surrender under the terms of the Treaty of Peace between Goryeo and Mongolia, achieving only a partial victory. Thus, the Goryeo dynasty was preserved. This meant that, while all the dynasties the Mongols passed through were destroyed, the Goryeo dynasty alone managed to survive. The Mongol Empire, a continental power, attempted to conquer Japan, a maritime power, but failed repeatedly due to typhoons. The second is the 7 Years' War, which is the Imjin War. In 1592, over 300 years after the Mongol invasion of Japan, Japan launched the Imjin War under the pretext of attacking the Ming dynasty. The Imjin War, initiated by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, lasted for 7 years, ending only in 1598. The phrase, burning the enemy's weapons for 7 years, refers to the war lasting 7 years. Here, the way through is blocked. This means that Japan's plan for expansion into the Asian mainland stalled and was discontinued. Two kinds of war refers to a situation in which both Mongolia's maritime expansion and Japan's continental expansion come to a halt on the Korean peninsula. The common thread between the Mongol and Japanese invasions of the Korean peninsula is that the entire country was trampled and reduced to ashes by the enemy. Despite this, the Korean dynasty was ultimately unable to be destroyed, and the route of passage across the peninsula to other regions was blocked. The significance of this history is closely related to the prophecy of the Book of Revelation, namely the emergence of Babylon. With the Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty in 1910, Japan's rule over the Korean peninsula began. During this period, Russia became communist in 1917. Japan's defeat in the Pacific War liberated the Korean peninsula from Japanese rule and established independence. At the same time, Soviet troops entered the Korean peninsula, severing the Korean peninsula's midsection. Japan played a decisive role in the division of the Korean peninsula into North and South. Thus, the Korean peninsula, situated between continental and maritime powers, was constantly subject to invasion, and a history of war was repeated. This is similar to the geopolitical position of Israel in Palestine. Israel is located at the western end of Asia, and the Korean peninsula is located at the eastern end of Asia. The history of these two countries resembles each other like twins. It mirrors the historical pattern of constant clashes between the various imperial powers of the north and the Egyptian powers of the south in Palestine. The place where the prophecies were written is Israel in Palestine, and the place where that prophecy is fulfilled is the Korean peninsula. The Gog and Magog, mentioned in the Book of Revelation, are often interpreted as the final northern coalition attacking God's people. In other words, they are defined as the worldwide forces of evil opposing God. We have discovered a comparable entity in world history to the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. That entity was the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. We have examined the connection between the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan, which corresponds to Gog and Magog, and the Babylonian Empire that appears in the Book of Prophecy within world history. The Babylon mentioned in Revelation is the Soviet Union, and the Gog and Magog, mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38, is the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. The Soviet Union built a communist state on the very foundation of the Mongol Empire. In the next lecture, we will explore Chapter 6, Section 8. The name will be known in Revelation and World History. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and World History. Hello, this is the 47th lecture on Revelation and World History. In the prophetic books and the Book of Revelation, an empire appears that invades Israel and its surrounding nations. This empire is called Babylon, And in the book of Revelation, along with the Babylonian Empire, another invading nation appears. That nation is Gog and Magog. Last time, we looked at the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. Gog is the title of the king, who rules over the land of Magog. Gog's army is described as consisting solely of cavalry. A nation with a similar structure to this description once appeared in history. It was the Mongol Empire built by Genghis Khan. The Babylonian Empire in the Book of Revelation is the Soviet Union. And Gog and Magog in Ezekiel is the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. In the very places where the Mongol Empire's horseshoes trod in the 13th century. Communist states were established in the 20th century. In this lecture, we will explore the name became known through Magog. Revelation and World History, Chapter 6, Section 8. The name is made known through Magog. All the peoples of the land will bury them, and through them they will be made a name. For it is the day when my glory will be revealed, declares the Sovereign Lord. Ezekiel chapter 39 verse 13. This prophecy speaks of the people who were invaded by Magog. Through the invasion of Magog, the name of the nation will be made known to the world. The term foreigners used to refer to South Korea is Korea. This name became known to the West during the Goryeo dynasty and has been used to this day. The name was made known during the period when the Mongols were continuously conquesting the Korean peninsula. As the Mongol Empire's power grew, Pope Innocent IV dispatched several envoys to the Mongol Empire, beginning with Father Carpini in 1245. At that time, the envoy sent by King Louis IX of France was William of Rubruck. Rubruck visited the Mongol capital in 1253 and wrote a letter describing what he saw and heard. Rubruck's letter included a section mentioning the Korean peninsula. The letter included the word Kale, which referred to Goryeo, the then name of Korea. This later became Kare, and later became fixed in English as Korea. The following is an excerpt from Rubruck's letter. William Booker said this to me. He himself witnessed the delegation of the Kale and Manse peoples. They lived in a region surrounded by a sea that freezes over in winter. The Mongols could invade their country by advancing through this frozen region in winter. They seem to have avoided invasion by paying an annual tribute of 32,000 tumen to the Mongol royal family. We referred to Min Kyung Bae's History of Korean Christianity. In this way, the name of Goryeo became known to the West through Rubruck, who was dispatched from France. At that time, no one could have imagined that the gospel would spread to this easternmost Korean peninsula, and that the church would flourish to the point of being called the Jerusalem of the East. Marco Polo, in his travels, referred to the Mongol Empire as Magog. We referred to Marco Polo's The Travels of Marco Polo. It was during this period of Mongol invasion that the name of the Korean peninsula became known to the world. The account of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel and the Babylon described in the Book of Revelation are closely related. The Mongol army, led by Genghis Khan, established a vast empire, encompassing the East and the West. The Babylon of Revelation, the Soviet Union and the Communist states, stands on the former lands of the Mongol Empire. And in the country invaded by them, known as Korea, the remainder of the prophecy is being fulfilled. He puts reed boats afloat on the water, and sends his messengers down the canal, saying, Go, you nimble messengers, to the land where the rivers divide the land, to a tall and handsome people. They are a people who have been feared since ancient times, and who are strong and trample on their enemies, Isaiah chapter 18 verse 2. The land divided by the rivers refers to the Korean Peninsula, whose borders are defined by the Yalu and Duman rivers. Tall and handsome people is the meaning of the word, used in the name of the country Goryeo dynasty, which is known to the world as the Republic of Korea, high and beautiful. The phrase, a nation treading down the enemy, refers to the historical fact that, despite constant foreign invasions, such as those by the Mongols and Japanese, the nation did not perish but instead repelled them. Goryeo, which Wang Gun subjugated Silla and established as its national title, took its name from the former Goguryeo, signifying its succession. Goguryeo also had a history of crushing invading enemies. The Sui dynasty of China twice led massive armies to invade Goguryeo, but suffered crushing defeats. Emperor Wen of the Sui dynasty led a navy and an army of 300,000 to attack Goguryeo in 598. But it is said that 8 or 9 out of 10 people died. Also, in 612, during the reign of his second son, Emperor Yang, he led a large army of 1,133,800 men to invade Goguryeo, but this time too, he failed. During the Battle of Salsa, led by General Yuljimundiog, when the Sui army first crossed the Liao River, there were 305,000 men in total. However, it is recorded that only 2,700 people returned alive. We referred to the Samguk Sagi, published by the Korean Spiritual Culture Research Institute. The two defeats against Goguryeo led to the fall of the Sui dynasty and the rise of the new Tang dynasty. Afterwards, Silla allied with the Tang dynasty, and the Silla-Tang allied forces destroyed Baekje and Goguryeo, unifying the three kingdoms of the Korean Peninsula. The Tang dynasty later attempted to conquer Silla, but even this failed. In this way, the dynasties of the Korean Peninsula have defeated all enemies that have invaded since ancient times, including the various dynasties of China, Mongolia, and Japan. They set reed boats afloat on the water. Isaiah chapter 18 verse 2. When we say reed boat, we are referring to a boat made of totora reeds, which can be found mainly in Lake Titicaca, Peru, South America. Furthermore, the boats made of bundled papyrus used on the Nile River in ancient Egypt can also be considered reed boats. A similar sight can also be seen on the Yalu River. They are rafts, rather than being a means of transportation or transport. This was a method used to bundle timber felled upstream and transported downstream in the form of a raft. We referenced the raft song resonating on the Yalu River, broadcast on SBS. Sending the messenger by the waterway. Rubric, the envoy sent by the King of France, was unable to set foot on the Korean Peninsula, but instead arrived at the mouth of the Yalu River and described the peninsula. That country, Goryeo, lives in a place surrounded by the sea that freezes over in the winter, he reported. It was through him that the word Korea, which is currently used worldwide, was first introduced to the West. The Gog and Magog, mentioned in the Book of Revelation, are often interpreted as the final northern coalition attacking God's people. In other words, they are defined as the worldwide forces of evil opposing God. We have discovered a comparable entity in world history to the description of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38. That entity was the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. We have examined the connection between the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan, which corresponds to Gog and Magog, and the Babylonian Empire that appears in the Book of Prophecy within world history. The Babylon mentioned in Revelation is the Soviet Union, and the Gog and Magog mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38 is the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. The Soviet Union built a communist state on the very foundation of the Mongol Empire. In the next lecture, we will explore Chapter 7, Section 1, What is the Battle of Armageddon? Of Revelation and World History. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and World History.